13.20 brought forth a bunch of OP picks like Jinx, Rammus, and Aurelion Sol, so Riot's looking to nerf all of them in 13.21. First Strike and Phase Rush went untouched in the initial nerfs to Keystone Runes, but they'll both end up being nerfed for this patch. With the help of our Challenger players and analyzing the most recent data, we are ready to bring you guys a complete look at the solo queue meta as we head into patch 13.21. But before we get into it, be sure to check out SkillCapped if you want to truly get better at League of Legends. We're the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We do this because our service really does work, and if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't pay. Learn more at the end of this video or click the link in the description below. Starting things off with the item and rune changes, let's have a look at the First Strike nerfs. The bonus true damage from First Strike is being lowered from 8 to 7%. This change really shouldn't decrease the viability of First Strike. If anything, certain melee champions may want to reconsider something else if they are in ranged matchups, but the gold generation of the rune has been untouched, and that's the main reason you take First Strike in the first place. Melee champions who run Phase Rush are being targeted for 13.21 as the bonus movement speed is dropping from 30 scaling to 60% to 25 scaling to 50%. Garen, Hecarim, Nunu, and Maokai are the melee champions who run Phase Rush the most right now, so they will be hit the hardest by this nerf. Phase Rush had become more attractive on Garen and Hecarim in 13.20 due to the Conqueror nerfs, but now with Phase Rush nerfed, it's likely the runes go back to being on more equal power levels. This patch will hurt jungle Maokai because Phase Rush and First Strike are his two main keystones, but it's really not the end of the world. Aftershock is actually completely fine on Maokai, just not being played nearly as much, so the priority on the rune should go up in 13.21. Nunu, on the other hand, is pretty much Phase Rush or nothing, so he's just flat out nerfed here. Riot is looking to tone down Garen without actually giving him a direct nerf, as we've got some Hullbreaker nerfs lined up. Bonus armor and magic resist for melee champions is going from 10 scaling to 75 to 10 scaling to 60. It's dropping for ranged champs as well, going from 5 scaling to 37 to 5 scaling to 30. A bit of a nerf to the mid to late game split push power of Hullbreaker, but in all honesty, we can't see this nerf being enough to dissuade players from running the item. Prior to this nerf, Hullbreaker could literally get up to 228% gold efficient on melee champions in the later game, and this nerf will only make the item a little less broken. In the correct spots where you are looking to split push, Hullbreaker is still going to be a godlike pickup. So it turns out removing the AD ratio from pet DPS was not the best idea, so Riot will be backtracking on that change in 13.21. The AD ratio on pet DPS will be back, which means many of the AD junglers who got hammered down in 13.20 will be on much better footing moving forward. With all those system changes out of the way, let's dive into the top lane adjustments. K'Sante will be getting some follow-up buffs for 13.21 as his 13.20 mini rework had landed on the underpowered side. Riot has stated that there will be a bunch of bug fixes issued. Q cast time based on bonus health cap is going from 1800 to 1200, which is a buff as you'll get that reduced cast time earlier on in the game. W maximum channel is up from 1 to 1.5 seconds. R and passive bonus damage is being increased from 35% flat to 45 scaling to 75%. R plus Q and E resets are now going to be instant instead of taking 0.1 seconds. All in all, some pretty minor buffs, and we can't see them significantly bolstering K'Sante's solo queue viability. We will be giving him a small push up the tier list for this patch, going from C into B tier. Top lane Tahm Kench will become stronger for 13.21 as Riot will be giving him more bonus health scaling on his passive damage. Base damage on passive is down from 8 scaling to 60 to 6 scaling to 48. Passive bonus health scaling is up though from 3 to 5%. W cooldown refund is also buffed, going from 40% flat to 40 scaling to 50%. The fact Tahm Kench loves rushing Heartsteel and the item literally has the most amount of bonus health for any mythic item means this buff to Tahm's passive is actually pretty significant. Tahm hasn't actually been all that terrible in recent patches as a counter pick to certain meta champs like Malphite and Tryndamere, so don't sleep on him in 13.21 as we'll be moving Tahm from B into A tier. One top lane champ who had been decimating the lower ranks in 13.20 was Dr. Mundo, so Riot has a nerf lined up for 13.21. E bonus AD is going from 2 scaling to 4% max health to 2 scaling to 3% max health. Change will definitely hurt Mundo's mid to late game impact, and a big reason why he shot up in power last patch was due to his scaling strength and games now lasting longer. With that said, we don't see this change drastically reducing Mundo's strength, especially for the lower ranks, so he will remain in the top lane S tier. Running down the complete top lane tier list, we have a bunch of adjustments for 13.21. OP tier is being locked down by Malphite, Nasus, and Ornn. Ornn is one top lane champ we think a lot of players are sleeping on right now as a result of the anti-snowball patch. Games lasting longer is a huge buff to Ornn because it allows him a greater opportunity to upgrade items and provide his team with so much added value. Nasus, being that scaling monster, is also seeing way more success due to the 13.20 changes. A less punishable early game plays into Nasus's favor extremely well as he spikes super hard in the mid game while his early game is his only true weak point. For Diamond and above, Nasus Nasus does fall off a bit, but since our tier lists are centered around what's best in Diamond and below, which is where 97% of the player base lies, we have him rated as an OP pick. Garen will be dipping out of the OP tier for 13.21 as the nerfs to Phase Rush and Hullbreaker will negatively affect him. Champ is still going to be extremely powerful though, so no reason to drop Garen from your champion pool if you've been having success. A few of the optimal bans for top lane include Garen, Aatrox, and Malphite. Malphite, Nasus, and Garen are three of the best low elo top laners. Riot went a bit overkill with the recent Bel'Veth nerfs, so they are looking to slowly buffer back up. E cooldown is going to be increased from 24 scaling to 18 seconds to 20 scaling to 16 seconds. Bel'Veth is a champion who thrives in drawn-out skirmishes, so 4 seconds off on E can be pretty impactful in certain situations. Not a buff that is going to suddenly push the champion back into meta, but with the pet DPS buffs as well this patch, Bel'Veth should be back in a playable state for 13.21, and we'll be moving her from B into A tier. Riot has a couple of buffs lined up for Hecarim as he was hit harder than most by the Gustwalker nerfs last patch, and will also be negatively influenced by the Phase Rush nerfs coming in 13.21. AD growth is going from 3.2 to 3.7. W duration is up from 4 to 5 seconds. All things considered, we don't see Hecarim gaining a ton of strength off of these buffs. Phase Rush being hit lessens the impact of the buffs, and Hecarim will remain in the jungle B tier for now. Master Yi was another jungler hit pretty hard by the 13.20 changes, so a direct buff is on its way. E cooldown will be dropping from 18 to 14 seconds. Similar change to Bel'Veth in the sense that this will increase the mid to late game skirmish power of Yi, but shouldn't have too much of an impact on his early game strength. We'll be adjusting Yi up one tier, going from B into A as a result of the buff. Jungle Morgana is going to be buffed again for 13.21, so definitely watch out for her this patch. W damage is up from 12 scaling to 52 to 12 scaling to 56. W monster damage is being increased as well from 165 to 170%. Morgan been looking like a really solid jungle option even prior to these buffs, so we're going to be giving her a push up into a very respectable A tier slot for 13.21. One of the most OP junglers from recent patches, being Briar, is going to be hit with a few nerfs. Attack speed growth is dropping from 2.3 to 2%. The bonus AD ratio on W missing health damage is dropping from 4 to 3.5%. Passive remaining bleed heal, however, is going up from 100 to 125%. All in all, some pretty reasonable nerfs considering how powerful Briar has been as of recent, so we'll only be dropping her one tier, going from OP into S. Rammus had shot up to holding a 54% win rate in 13.20, so some much needed nerfs are on the way. Q damage is being lowered, going from 100 scaling to 200 to 80 scaling to 200. W resists are being reduced from 35 plus 40 scaling to 80% down to 30 plus 35 scaling to 75%. If these were nerfs to a normal OP tier champion, they would likely see a pretty decent decline in strength, but because Rammus was Giga OP in 13.20, he's likely not going to lose a ton of relative strength for 13.21. If anything, Rammus will just be more in line with the other top tier junglers, and he'll still be a really great pick, so we're only adjusting him from OP into S. Riot has a few off-meta jungle buffs penciled in for 13.21, and first up will be Brand. Health is going down from 590 to 570, but health scaling is up from 102 to 105. Armor is significantly increased from 22 to 27, while armor growth is down from 4.7 to 4.2. Level 1 attack speed is being increased from 0.625 to 0.681, which will not only help Brand jungle, but it will make last hitting with Brand mid lane a bit more smooth as well. Attack speed growth is increased from 1.36 to 2%. Passive monster damage is seeing a huge buff, going from 120 to 250%. One nerf being thrown in there is to Brand E damage, as it's dropping from 70 scaling to 170 to 65 scaling to 165. Some pretty nice changes for Brand jungle, and it will be very interesting to see where he lands throughout the patch. There really isn't very much data to go off of from 13.20 in regards to Brand's power in the jungle, so it's extremely difficult to give an accurate rating until we see him on live for a few days. For now, we'll be placing Brand in the B tier, but check back for our mid-patch tier list to see if anything changes. The second off-meta jungler who will be buffed for this patch is Zyra. Level 1 attack speed is up, going from 0.625 to 0.681. Passive base damage is going down at the later ranks, but the AP ratio is being increased. This should actually have a negative effect on support Zyra, since she's not able to acquire a ton of AP. Q damage is going up though by 20 at max rank, and the AP ratio is up from 60 to 65%. E damage is down by 40 base at max rank, while the AP ratio is going from 50 to 60%. So although these changes do look to increase the power of Zyra jungle, with the base damage of her passive and E dropping, we can't ignore the fact support Zyra may actually be taking a hit here. Zyra jungle should be looking pretty spicy in 13.21, and she's actually been played a bit more than Brand in recent patches, seeing some respectable results. We're not expecting too much out of these changes, so for now we'll be placing Zyra in the B tier, but we'll be keeping a close eye on her throughout the patch, and we'll adjust accordingly in the mid-patch tier list if if needed. Moving on to the jungle tier list, very much like top lane, we have a bunch of adjustments to cover. OP tier has a whole new look for 13.21 as it's Graves, Zac, and Jarvan taking home the 3 spots. Graves had been a massive riser due to the 13.20 changes, and with Riot bringing back the AD ratio on pet DPS, it should only propel Graves to even greater heights. If you're thinking of picking up Graves for the first time, our Mastered Minutes course can really help to fast track your success on the champ. Zac is a phenomenal tank jungler right now, as his clear was significantly bolstered in 13.20 due to the pet DPS armor and magic resist ratio buff. Jarvan had been hanging around in 13.20 as one of the best AD junglers, so with the AD ratio back on pet DPS this patch, he's only going to be even scarier. Rengar is one jungler we need to talk about right now because it's actually disgusting the difference in win rate between Duskblade and Ghostblade users. Duskblade Rengar players are heavily bringing down the champion's overall win rate, as they are only winning 45% of the time. Ghostblade users, on the other hand, are winning 51% of the time, which is a 6% gap. A borderline S tier pick with one item and a trash tier pick with the other, as Duskblade was recently nerfed while Ghostblade just saw buffs. In Masters and above, where more players are actually building Ghostblade, Rengar has a 51% win rate, but in Plat and below, where Duskblade is most popular, his overall win rate is only 47%. This 47% tally would generally net Rengar as a B or C tier worthy pick, but with pet DPS buffs this patch and the Ghostblade rush being super powerful, he's definitely not a bad champion. Players just need to adapt, and as a result, we'll be moving Rengar into the jungle A tier. This is why you simply cannot pay attention to the overall win rate of a champion when trying to determine their power, because oftentimes players are just building the champion wrong, which can make it seem like the champ is worse off than they actually are. A few of the best jungle bans of the patch include Briar, Graves, and Rammus. To escape low elo the fastest from the jungle, look into picking up Rammus, Shyvana, or Lilia. LeBlanc has been a terrible mid lane pick ever since Riot nerfed the viability of static Shiv on AP champs, so some much needed buffs are headed her way. WAP ratio is going from 65 to 75%. E2 AP ratio is up from 70 to 80%. All things considered, we were expecting a little more here, being that LeBlanc is legitimately a 45% win rate champion. At most, these buffs could bump her up a few percentage points, but even then, she's still in the bottom percentile of mid lane picks. For now, LeBlanc remains in the mid lane C tier, as there are going to be much better options for solo queue in 13.21. Aurelion Sol had become one of the most OP mid laners in 13.20 due to the anti-snowball changes, so a few nerfs are being issued. Q DPS is being lowered at the later ranks, while it will remain the same early on. Q burst damage is going to see the exact same treatment, staying the same early on, but being reduced later. Nerfs seem fair to target the scaling power of Aurelion Sol, as that is where he shines the most. Do the nerfs kill the champion? Likely not. Will he still be the OP pick of 13.20? We don't expect so, and we'll be adjusting him into an S tier position. Unlike top lane and jungle, the mid lane tier list just has a few minor adjustments. OP tier will consist of Vex, Kassadin, and with Aurelion Sol dropping out, taking his spot will be Naafiri. Bit of a shocker that Kassadin was not nerfed in 13.21, but it's likely due to the fact he has not been quite as lethal as Aurelion Sol in the lower ranks. With Sol dropping down, Cass is definitely the pick or ban mid for this patch, while Sylas and Naafiri are also great ban choices for mid lane. Malzahar, Aurelion Sol, and Annie will continue to be 3 of the most optimal mids for low elo. Moving on to the bot lane changes, on-hit Varus will be buffed for this patch, as his W on-hit damage is going from 7 scaling to 27 to 7 scaling to 31. E-slow is also being increased by 5% at all ranks. Pretty minor buffs overall, and they'll just look to bring Varus more in line with the middle of the pack ADCs. We'll be leaving Varus in the ADC B tier for the time being. Lethality Caitlyn had overtaken Crit in recent patches as the most optimal build, and Riot does not like that, so they are issuing some changes. Passive Crit scaling is going up from 81.25 to 85%. R cooldown is being nerfed, going from 90 scaling to 60 seconds to 90 seconds at all ranks. This one likely kills Lethality Kate, as being able to spam R off cooldown in the mid to late game was a big draw to the build. R damage is being changed, with the bonus AD ratio going from 200 to 175%. Damage increase based on crit chance is going up from 35% to 50%. So overall, Lethality Kate is definitely looking like it's on its way out for 13.21. Stormrazor Rush should come back to being the best rush option while you transition into Infinity Edge as your mythic. With that said, we do expect Caitlyn to lose a bit of relative strength due to these adjustments, so we'll be dropping her from A into B tier. Even though there are changes that buff crit, Caitlyn still suffers from the lethality focused nerfs like the R cooldown nerf and the R bonus AD ratio nerf, so it's not like Crit Kate is being flat out buffed. Since the Jinx buffs landed, a bit more powerful than Riot intended in 13.20, and some nerfs are being issued to help level the playing field, passive will no longer infinitely scale as it will be capped at 5 stacks. Some of the clips that were surfacing in 13.20 of late game Jinx were just way too disgusting, and this nerf looks to combat that. One more nerf is that turret and epic monster takedowns will no longer grant stacks beyond the first. This will look to combat the late game tower pushing power of Jinx, as it was a little ridiculous how quickly she could mow through a base getting stacks off multiple tower takedowns. The baseline power of Jinx really should not be dropping that much though. In the majority of games, you're not going to be getting more than 5 passive stacks in a fight, so even though it's now capped, it's not a game-changing nerf. Jinx is still going to be way more powerful than she was prior to the original buffs, and will only be adjusting her from OP into S due to these nerfs. Just a couple of adjustments to the ADC tier list for 13.21 as the OP tier will be locked down by 2 champions, being Vayne and Ziggs. Ziggs is the definition of free elo right now, as his recent buff from 13.20 has turned him into a godlike bot lane carry. Vayne is the best traditional ADC, as the anti-snowball patch has been exactly what she needed to push past all other ADCs in priority. Jinx, Vayne, and Ziggs are 3 of the best bot lane bans of the patch. Ziggs, Misfortune, and Ashe are who we recommend the most for the lower ranks. The only change being directed towards support for 13.21 is going the way of Seraphine. Base mana is dropping from 440 to 360, however, mana per level and base mana regen are both going up. Armor is seeing a big boost, going from 19 to 26. Health growth is down though, from 104 to 90. For a champion who scales exceptionally well, more base armor to help get Seraphine past the early game is a huge win for her. There are a few Q changes, with the cooldown dropping at rank 1, while the base damage is up at the later ranks and the AP ratio is going down. W cooldown will be lowered at the later ranks, however, the mana cost is being significantly increased from 50 scaling to 90 to 80 scaling to 100. W shield is going up at the later ranks, but W heal is going to be lowered. E cost drops at the later ranks, and E damage will be increased at the later ranks. So overall, a lot of buffs to increase the scaling strength of Seraphine, while her early game durability gets better too. Everything ties together really nicely because the armor buff helps with surviving early on, so that you can scale into that mid game, which will now be stronger. Seraphine should be back in a good spot for 13.21, and we will be pushing her out of the B tier and into A. Just a couple of minor changes to the support tier list for 13.21, as the OP tier will consist of Blitzcrank and Senna. We're dropping Zyra out of the OP tier, as the changes that are directed at helping her in the jungle actually hurt her in the support role. Less base damage on her abilities in exchange for more scaling does not bode well for her support, because it's much harder to reach items to get the most out of AP ratios. Senna is the powerhouse support pick right now, as the anti-snowball patch has seen her priority skyrocket. For a champion who scales infinitely, longer games are always going to play into Senna's favor, and that's exactly what we've gotten. A few of the most optimal support bans for this patch are Senna, Blitzcrank, and Rakan. Heimerdinger, Zyra, and Blitzcrank are 3 of the best low elo supports. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about SkillCapped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into Elo Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. So that's going to be all for our latest update on the solo queue tier list. Thanks so much for watching, good luck with your rank climbs, and we'll see you in the next one.